Argentina recently elected Javier Milei, a radical libertarian leader, to slash budgets and hopefully reverse a 40-year inflation cycle. Let's dive into it. Argentina, historically speaking, has had some of the worst inflation in any developed country half a century. It's been a ridiculously long time. And similar to El Salvador, who we've talked about on this channel before, the people were absolutely sick of it. They were not going to stand for any more of this socialism. But unlike El Salvador and their President Bukele, Javier Milei has taken an absolutely radical approach. He's called the Pope a filthy leftist. He named his dogs after famous economists and calls them his mentors.
One of my dogs was named after Milton Friedman, but another one is called Murray.
Presumably the Milton dog barks every time you mention Trump.
And he was a former tantric sex coach. You can't make this up. This is the president of Argentina right now. And after winning the election, he's gotten a ton of attention of making these massive, passionate arguments against socialism, against the effect that a big government state has on its people, on its citizens.
Today, I am present to inform you that the Western world is facing a significant threat. It is in danger because those who are supposed to defend the values of the Western world are co-opted by a worldview that inevitably leads to socialism and consequently to poverty and economic deprivation.
So this, let's set the stage here. This is at the World Economic Forum where kind of all of the not-so-socialists get together to decide how the world's going to function in the future. The first 15 seconds of that were actually pretty good. Now he's getting into some craziness.
Motivated by some well-intentioned desires to help others, by the desire to belong to a privileged caste, the main leaders of the Western world have abandoned the model of freedom for different versions of what we call collectivism. That collectivist experiments are never the solution to the problems that afflict the citizens of the world, but rather they are their cause. There is no one better than us Argentines to provide testimony on these two issues. When we embraced freedom in 1860, in 35 years, we became the world's first dominant power. While when we embraced collectivism, over the past 100 years, we saw how our citizens began to systematically impoverish themselves until they fell to the 140th position in the world. But before we can have this discussion, it would be important for us to first look at the data that supports why free market capitalism is not only a possible system to end world poverty, but also the only morally desirable system to achieve it.
That is such a based statement. Free market capitalism is not only the best way to get the citizens to unimpoverish themselves, but it is the only moral way to achieve that. Oof.
They claim capitalism is bad because it's individualistic and collectivism is good because it's altruistic towards others. And thus they strive for social justice. It's unfair because the state is financed through taxes, and taxes are collected coercively. Or can any of us confidently say that they pay taxes of their own free will? This implies that the state is funded through coercion, and that the higher the tax burden, the greater the coercion, leading to a reduction in freedom.
So he said that very plainly and very calmly, and I agree with that statement 100%. But if you say that to probably any type of normal citizen who's maybe not really based, who doesn't really understand the makings of the free world, they're going to think you're insane. They would not think that their taxes are forced upon them by coercion, which is kind of an interesting concept because even myself a couple of years ago, I would have maybe rejected that statement. But really, if you don't pay your taxes, they come after you with force to collect the taxes. And so we don't really voluntarily pay taxes. It isn't really a peaceful environment where that happens. We're just so programmed into conformity that, very few people actually get forced upon. And when you do, it's like, oh, well, he didn't play by the rules, so obviously they came after him with force. We almost excuse the behavior of the theft of taxes. That's an interesting point of view. Comments from this talk. We have, thank you, Argentina, for electing this man who just gave the world the final warning. We in the U.S. salute you. Yeah, the U.S. is kind of like Argentina from 50 years ago, just starting their path down this socialist journey, and Argentina hopefully just exiting this path of socialism. I did not come to guide the sheep. I came to awaken the lions. This is from one of the speeches that he had, I think on his election speech or maybe his electorate speech.
Yo no me metí acá para estar guiando corderos. Yo me metí acá para despertar leones.
That's a great statement. I didn't come to guide the sheep. Basically stating, I don't want to be some kind of leader that just gets you to blindly follow me. I want you to be a savage. I want you to be a ferocious, free market capitalist that's going to produce value for other people.
Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera.
This is President Milei basically just absolutely slashing bloated government budgets.
Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera.
Environment.
Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas,
Public
afuera. Aunque te resistas. Vamos a seguir por acá. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación. Algo bien del sector privado. Nada bueno salió del sector público. ¡Afuera!
Oh, that's interesting. Something good in the private sector that's not been good in the public sector because the incentives are not aligned. In the private sector, the Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovation, yeah, all good things, but you need a functional business, a functional way to produce value in order to make that ministry work. In the public sector, you literally just leech value, not really tied to your results. You just are entitled to that value through a tax or a printing system, and then you go and do your research. And so, yeah, I tend to agree. Something good in the public sector, in the private sector, but not good in public.
Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social, afuera. Ministerio de Educación,
afuera.
Adoctrinamiento, afuera.
Something I agree heavily with. I do not believe the state should be involved in education because when you control the education, you can control history. If you can control history, you can control the future because you can teach people selective things on what you thought. If I was in charge of educating an entire mass people, I would focus my energy on creating capitalists. This is my bias. I would create entrepreneurs and create people that want to give value to society. Now, obviously, I think that would be a good thing. I'm sure some of you hopefully probably disagree with me and have a better plan for education. And this is where the free market comes in. Let me educate, let you educate, let's all educate together. But we've got a problem. We've got one single source of education when the state funds, when the state dictates what and how we educate our children. Afuera.
Ministerio de Transporte, afuera. Ministerio de Salud, afuera. Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, afuera. ¿Cómo queda el Estado? Ministerio de Capital Humano, Ministerio de Infraestructura, Ministerio de Economía, Ministerio de Justicia, Ministerio de Seguridad, Ministerio de Defensa, Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores y Ministerio del Interior. Se acabó el curro de la política. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
Wow, absolutely savage. This guy is Javier Milei. You imagine Justin Trudeau or imagine Joe Biden or Donald Trump saying this, the outrage that would be. This is the acting Argentinian president. Ron Swanson would be proud. I mean, yeah, probably. The best part of that is that he's done exactly what he promised to do. This is actually a really interesting take, is how refreshing it is. Even if you disagree with the methods, it is very promising for someone to run a campaign and say, I'm going to do exactly this if I'm elected, and then actually do it. We are so unaccustomed to this. Since I've been alive, the last 30 years in Canada and in the USA for that matter, these politicians campaign and promise and campaign and promise and campaign and promise and then don't deliver on over half of it. Even 90% of it doesn't get delivered. He's Ron Paul with Trump's aggression. That's actually a really good way to put it. And some absolutely wild hair. I worked in the government finance research sector in Germany, people just waiting for millions of euros each project and nothing came out of them ever. Yeah, this is the problem when your incentives aren't aligned. When you're not tied to a free market value creation project, you end up researching stupid things that actually provide zero value for the human beings that are actually paying for it.
Since becoming president in December, Milei has devalued the currency by 50%, halted all public works, slashed subsidies on fuel and electricity, and reduced the number of ministries by half. But this is only part of the plan.
Milei came to power with a promise to carry out labor tax and other reforms that he says will transform Argentina. But Milei has a minority in Congress, and since taking office, he has been in constant confrontation with other political parties. That's why he has been unable to pass legislation that will help him push his economic agenda.
Milei's austerity plan has an objective to reduce inflation, but it has also caused a contraction of the economy, with a sharp drop in consumer spending.
I think we as Bitcoiners need to really understand, for the world to transition from a fiat to a Bitcoin standard, there's going to be so much pain. There's a lot of people in this world that don't actually provide any value. And under a Bitcoin standard, those people can't survive. There's going to be a ton, and growth means pain required for those people who are by no fault of their own, right? They were born into a world. People are like water, and we just flow to the path of least resistance. And if the path of least resistance has landed you in an environment where you can provide no value and still earn a living, that's what you're going to do. Those people are in for a rude awakening. And there's a lot of people that are in for rude awakenings as Argentina transitions from this kind of socialist into this capitalist society. The end result of that project is obviously a positive one, and it helps for the long-term sustainability of Argentina. But maybe I'll pass the question off to you guys. What do you think? Is there a way to meaningfully help that transition happen? Or over what time frame should that transition happen? Is it a rip the Band-Aid, do it all right now, have the poverty, have the recession, get it over with, and then transition into a sound money standard? Or should it be done gradually over a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-year time horizon? Obviously, our political system doesn't allow for that to happen, because after 4 years of that, micro pain, it'll be done. So again, we have an unnatural force dictating how we try to get back to a natural environment. But I do wonder, is it better to rip the Band-Aid off or have this transition happen over decades? So I want to end this video with a bit of a quote, a bit of a statement, and I want to hear what you think of that. We have Nassim Taleb saying, "With my family, I'm a communist. With my close friends, I'm a socialist. At the state level of politics, I'm a Democrat. At higher levels, I'm a Republican. And at federal levels, I'm a libertarian." This is an interesting point of view. On smaller systems, it kind of highlights the need for centralization and the sizes at which centralization can actually work. At a tiny, your smallest level of community, high levels of central planning are required for efficiency. And as you branch out, you almost need to decentralize and remove those single choke points, remove those single biases in order to thrive and function. And I think that this is actually kind of an interesting concept that we can take from even from a Bitcoin perspective. When you look at Bitcoin, you look at the protocol of Bitcoin, you think about how decentralized Bitcoin is, it's arguably been stunting its growth. Bitcoin is not able to expand and succeed in a fast way because of its decentralization, because of its lack of central planning. Can't have speed with decentralization. Likewise, you can't have security with centralization. So I kind of like that point, but I want to hear what you have to think. Do you agree that different paths, different parts of your life should have different levels of centralized planning? Or are you an all or nothing kind of person? Do you think that you need one style of leadership for the smallest level, your family, to the largest level on a global scale? Comment down below, subscribe to see more videos like this, and as always, stay sovereign.